Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take on this Thursday morning. We've gotten through hump day, although I can't even call it that because it's a shortened week. But the concerns over the Delta variant continue to be a part of the marketplace. Matter of fact, yesterday when you look at the markets, we sort of got to those lows fairly early in the session before recovering off those lows, but nonetheless finishing in negative territory. You look at the Dow, we still finished down about 68 points. You look over at the NASDAQ, NASDAQ was down. Now, we've been talking about what a tight range the NASDAQ has been in, and oftentimes still finishing either just barely in the positive or into the negative. But yesterday, much wider range. As a matter of fact, the downside, it was down as much as 150 plus points yesterday, rallied off of that, but still finished the day down about 87 points. So a little bit of a negative streak happening right now of late, and a lot of that having to do with, all right, what's next? How about the economy? What's happening with the economy if the Delta variant becomes something that is hanging around a little bit longer than some expected? All of those questions being asked, and that seems to be a little bit of what's been dragging on the markets, no doubt. The volatility certainly popped up yesterday. As a matter of fact, early in the day, we had hit those highs of the volatility index. You look over at the VIX, it was trading 19.5. We were kind of in this range from, call it 18 to 19.5. That 19.5 was relatively late morning. It was earlier in the session. And then as we started to get off of some of those lows, that volatility immediately started to get under pressure. We closed underneath 18. We actually closed at 17.95 yesterday. And so that just shows you just how rapidly folks are willing to say, all right, this volatility is getting too high once again. We're going to press it right down. We've talked about this, how sustained we've been across 20 on the volatility index. Not very. Matter of fact, 24 hours, 48 hours at the most. And then we seem to be right back into this teens kind of an area for the volatility index. Volume, again, 37.6 million contracts. But here's an interesting part about what I was looking at yesterday, dissecting a little bit deeper into the volumes of yesterday. Great volumes once again. Apple, 1.4 million. You know what was number 2 on the list? Yep, one of our rebel stocks. We had this Vinco Ventures out there, BBIG, and that was actually over 1 million contracts yesterday, along with Tesla, but they had more contracts than Tesla actually even traded. And number 4 coming in, AMC, just under 1 million contracts. So these rebel stocks, and don't let anybody fool you. We were just talking about it, Glenn and I. I'll tell you what, you take a look at something like a GameStop. These names, after making these moves, are nowhere close to where they started before these moves came into play. All these names, obviously, with a lot of the same kinds of metrics, specifically that high short interest levels and the huge volumes that followed in. And that's something that's been playing out, it seems like, day after day, week after week, absolutely, starting from the very beginning of the year. So that continues on. Crude, 68 to 69 seems to be sort of that area where we find ourselves. A little bit of pressure on energy yesterday. It was one of the weakest. It was the weakest of the sectors, down nearly 1.5% yesterday. Materials was down about 1%. Technology was down about 0.5%. Where do we find strength? In the areas that you don't oftentimes want to see strength in the marketplace. Utilities. We did have some consumer staples actually that were trading pretty well, but when you take a look, you had pressure on Pulte Homes. It was down close to 6%. Freeport Mac, when you look at materials, Freeport McMoran, that was a name that we've been talking about, had this unbelievable run, kind of paused, and down yesterday about 5.5%. And then Twitter down about 4% yesterday. So a nice broad look at where we are seeing some of the pressures in the marketplace. What wasn't down and really had a wonderful day was right here in the backyard of me, General Mills, just about 15, 20 miles that away. I'll tell you what, that had a really nice day yesterday, up almost 5%. And those Chinese names had a little bit of pressure once again yesterday. So as we come into today, the conversation going into the opening bell, Delta variant, some of the concerns, the economy. We had again, the one thing that seemed to have gotten looked over, it seemed like at least early on, these jobless claims, another pandemic low. So something that I think that folks were looking at, but not looking at as hard as they were looking at the variant, some of the concerns. So we were negative in the pre-market. We rapidly started to get a little bit more improvement as we started into the day. We had a quick dip, then we seemed to come back. We were relatively flat. Last I looked, we had accelerated on the Dow, and the Dow was up about 140 points. And I looked over at the NASDAQ, it was up about 45, 50 points. So a nice turnaround from what we were seeing early morning where things were either flat or in negative territory. Volatility index, it was in the 18s. That didn't last long. We got to 17 and a half. That didn't last long. We pushed even lower into the low 17s as far as the volatility index. Now, what really changed in that first, call it half hour, 45 minutes of the trading session? Well, the flip in energy is definitely one of them. Energy started off the day where we had crude underneath 68. It rallied back. It got back up and over 69. It wasn't moving into positive territory yet, at least last I looked, but that big flip caused energy to go from being down about 0.5% to being up about 1.25% and actually leading the sectors of the marketplace to the upside. The financials were up about 0.5%. They're up about 1%. We see a little bit of momentum starting to work into different areas of the marketplace. There's absolutely no doubt about that. By the way, you want those beta names, that XOP, as I oftentimes refer to it in terms of the ETF, but the Devon Energies and all the rest of those, Diamondback and so forth, definitely contributing, because when you look at energy, up about 1.25%. The XOP, that was up a little over 1.6%. So a little bit more strength. Obviously, when beta starts to move, it moves to the downside, but it also moves just as well to the upside. So Bitcoin, haven't hit on this a whole lot. It's been hanging around that 50,000, got a little bit of a pullback, but understandably so after the move from 29,000 back all the way up over 50,000. And last I looked earlier, we were trading right around that 47,000 sort of level. So call it somewhere close to 47,000 for Bitcoin. Not that far off of where we just were, but definitely pulling off the 50,000 level. So got two unusuals for you, and then a quick thing I got to highlight for you as well. Number one, Amazon. We don't talk about this name all that often for unusual option activity. Why? Well, it's a $3,400 stock. Actually, $3,500. $3,545 is where the stock was trading this morning. We had a buyer of 5,700 of the September 10. Yep, today is the 9th. These expire tomorrow. You got today and tomorrow for these to work. And what did they buy? They bought the 3,550 calls that expire tomorrow. Started out a little over $11, finished up close to $20 for these options. Stock obviously starts to move as we start to see these calls start to ratchet in there. Stock started to move a little bit to the upside. The options started to move a little bit to the upside. Really interesting to see Amazon. We'd seen it just a few weeks ago, and it's interesting, and that's why I definitely have to highlight it, because you do not see this name that frequently for unusual option activity, but we certainly are seeing some nice, healthy buying and a very expensive buying today. Secondly, a name that does hit a lot, but it's also very, very short term, Microsoft. These expire September 10th. Yep, that's tomorrow. 14,000 of the 302.50 calls. So stock was trading about 301.50. They're looking at the 302.50s, not needing a whole lot of movement for these to move to the upside, but do need a nice upside move in a fairly short period of time, call it 48 hours. Stock was trading at that level, as I say, at 301.50. Those options were 45 cents to start with. They finished trading at about $1. So 14,000 of those, a nice, big, healthy chunk that we're seeing in Microsoft. A lot of different names hitting today. Some of them were repeat names that we'd already highlighted either earlier this week or something maybe from last week, but a lot of repeat paper coming in right now, and a lot of activity we're seeing in the unusual options room that we've got over here at Market Rebellion. Speaking of which, today, 4 o'clock Eastern time, John and Ryan Mastro are going to be getting together. They're going to be talking about how do you trade the unusual options? How do you navigate through these markets? And how do they select? And they'll give you a lot of ideas on what we do here at Market Rebellion, how we do it, how Ryan decides to select what trades he's looking at, how John decides to select a lot of the trades that he's looking at. And believe it or not, John and I rarely talk throughout the day. We are very individually just looking and picking and choosing and doing that type of thing. But I'll tell you what, it's always interesting to hear everybody else's perspective, and you're going to want to hear that. So tune in today, 4 o'clock Eastern. Market Rebellion, baby. Get educated. You want to have that knowledge. This world of the derivatives is absolutely exploding. We love it. Exciting every single day. I was just last week at the Minnesota State Fair, and they were asking me, they said, Pete, why do you get up every single morning to trade? You probably are doing pretty well, it seems. And I said, you know what? I look forward to every single day, because every single day is a challenge and an opportunity, and I'm excited about it. And a lot of that has to do with the derivatives markets and the great people that I'm working with here at Market Rebellion. Folks, have a great day at trading.